Okay, so last weekend you should have seen me reassembling this NVT Easy Rider engine, but unfortunately I came down with a cold, so all you got was a YouTube short. Sorry about that. Unfortunately I still have the cold after a week, but I will persevere with rebuilding the engine, and the first thing is to heat up the cases with my blowtorch to press in the bearings. I would be using the oven, but the wife is making some cherry pies. This is just for demonstration purposes because these are the old bearings. The new bearings are currently in the freezer where they've been for a week, nicely chilled. And the idea is you can tap the bearings in using a suitably sized socket and a rubber faced hammer. So I'm using a 24mm socket for the smaller output bearing. With the crank bearings, I'm using a 27mm socket because the wider end of it actually fits the larger bearing and the smaller end of it fits the smaller bearing. Didn't even tap it in. That's freezing for you. Right, now for the other side. Let's see if the second bearing will drop straight in. Yep. Now for that last bearing. The last one. Voila. All in without having to tap them. So just let those cool down and we'll begin the reassembly. Okay, so before I assemble the cases, I'm going to put some oil on the bearings. I've already put some gearbox oil on the output shaft bearing. I'm going to put some two-stroke oil on the crank bearings. Okay, so it's easy to insert the pedal shaft and the output shaft in one go with the chain attached because you won't get the chain on afterwards. But pay attention to that part there. Zoom in. That's got to be in between those parts of the casting, stop it from rotating. Just about ready to insert the crankshaft. It's in the freezer, cooling down. It does actually show you on the Haynes manual to put this assembly on that side first, but because being able to see that little tang is easier, put it on this side. I'm going to try this. Got the center gasket on, got a very thin smear of Permatex sealant, just in case there's any leaks, although this seems to be a very good quality gasket, so I'm hoping it's going to be okay. And then this one. Yeah. Perfect. So two side cases assembled. Does take a little bit of tapping, and you've also got to make sure everything aligns properly because you've got 3 dowel pins there and 3 shafts, as well as getting that crankshaft bearing there aligned properly. Alright, just got to put the case screws in now. These are all Allen head. These are actually just there for holding the two sides of the cases together. Never use these for reassembling them, pulling the case together, because you can actually strip the thread. Okay, I'm going to put the oil seals on this side of the engine first. This is the left hand side, and this is one of the crank seals. It's actually a double lip seal. I'll zoom in a little bit. What that means is, if you can see that, there's a double lip on either side. This inner seal there. You can get single lip ones as well. They look exactly the same as this, but they've only got the one lip. That's the oil seals installed. There's a 22mm long reach socket on this one, 17mm long reach on this one to press them in place. And this one on the pedal shaft, I use the tip on this paintbrush to just gently push it into place. Note that they're all recessed as well, they're not flush. Also note the orientation of these crankshaft seals. They face outwards, which is the correct way of doing them. If you have them the other way around, this part of the seal rubs against the bearing and it wears away quite quickly. So if you've watched the previous videos in this series, you noted that I've cable tied all these different assemblies together so that all the shims and spacers and everything are in the kind of right assembly sequence for anything to go back in. This is a bit of a pain to get in, this actual centrifugal clutch. Use a long reach 3/4 socket. I'll actually go over that shaft there nicely. You can just tap it in place using your rubber hammer. I'm also using a little bit of engine oil as well to lubricate various parts as I assemble them, so there's no kind of dry points when the engine starts up. I've pretty much got it all assembled now, the clutch assembly, the second gear assembly. There is a woodruff key inside this gear here. Remember to put that in, otherwise this will just spin, it will freewheel. Other than that, you've got to kind of put that on at the same time as this section because it's got a mesh with the gear. There's a bevel gear under here. If you don't do that, you won't be able to get it in place. It's pretty straightforward. Just use that big nut there to hold this in place, stop from spinning when you tighten up the little nut there. With that nut there, you can actually kind of grip this and just tighten it and then put the circlip on afterwards. So the engine is now at this stage it was when I first received it. It wasn't complete, if you remember. I've put the gearbox cover back on again just to allow me to stick it on its side and put the primary sprocket on here. Although it seems to be missing a spring washer. According to the manual, there should be one there and there wasn't one fitted. So we'll take that off the other engine along with the stator plate, the flywheel, and also, obviously, the cylinder barrel. So as you can see, I have removed the engine that came with the bike when the owner bought it, because I need to remove the clutch cable, the stator plate, the magneto, and possibly the cylinder head and barrel from this one to go on the engine over there that I've been rebuilding. Right, off with its head. Actually looks quite clean. I could do with a slight decoke. So I can tell from that gasket this engine has been apart fairly recently, probably during its original restoration. That's a new gasket and how much oil is around there. That is from in there because the actual crankcase is full of gearbox oil. And that is a sure enough sign that the oil seal has failed on the gearbox side. Right, so I got to remove the small end bearing off of the conrod. I thought there was a spare one in the box of bits, but there's not. So I can remove it using a socket, small cap head bolt, and a washer. Looks serviceable. I've just been comparing the conrods on this engine as well as the one I've been rebuilding, and this one's got an extra oil hole there and there for the small end bearing, and one in the end there, whereas the other engine, the original one's only got the one in the end. So I'm not sure if someone's actually drilled additional ones. I have to consult the Haynes manual on that. I've just spun the engine around ready to get the cover off to take the stator plate off and the magneto. That is how much oil dripped out the crankcase. I don't have a puller for this file, but I've got very strong hands. As mentioned in earlier videos, someone had done a very good job at marking up the magneto with the timer marks, and they were referencing a point on the case by here. But to flop the stator over, I've also got to get that in the right place as well. And luckily, they've actually got it right the way over, so the mounting screws are on the one side of the slots, which I think is going to make it a lot easier to line up. I've still got to check it afterwards though, it's got to be accurate. The mounting screws are a right swine to get up because they were absolutely mullered. So a little bit earlier, it was actually yesterday when I was taking this sprocket off the other engine, I mentioned there should be a spring washer on there according to the manual. This one hasn't got a spring washer either, but it has got a threaded outside to it, which I presume is for some kind of puller, where the other sprocket hasn't got that. So for now, it's just going to stay on this engine and the other sprocket's going to stay on the other engine. Next job is to remove the gearbox cover, so I get this clutch cable off. The reason I didn't take it off while the engine was still on the bike because it's still a gearbox oil in it, and it was actually a right swine to get off because whoever restored it used a piece of 3-core mains flex cable to replace the wiring loom, and it was so thick it was jamming the little cable run where all like the throttle and the brake cables run through. I couldn't get it out, so I'm going to be replacing that piece of flex because one, it's too big, and two, it shouldn't be on a bike. And if you're going to restore something, you're going to do it properly, and I felt it kind of spoiled it a little bit. Much blasphemy later, because it's a swine to get these covers off because of the pedal shaft. Anyway, I need this part here off the end of the clutch cable as well as the clutch cable. I might try to swap this whole thing over. If it was my bike, I'd just be swapping the whole cover over and leave it at that. But for originality, we're using the other cover because it is the correct one. This one's got Convert on it, and the original cover's got NVT on it. So that's why we're doing that. As you can see, to remove that part from that casing, I've actually had to basically remove it complete with the inner cable. You can punch that roll pin out of there, but you still wouldn't be able to sort of like pull it through this part here without pulling the cable out first and sliding the whole thing off of it. I know there's an amendment to the later ones, they put like an extension on it, but as this is a very early engine, 1977, it hasn't got that. Okay, so I knew this engine rebuild was going too smoothly. This here is the cover of the engine that was smoking its nuts off. And this here is the clutch adjuster that goes in that hole there. Fits quite nicely. This here is the gearbox cover of the engine I've been rebuilding, which is the original one for the engine, and it doesn't fit. It's too small. This is the biggest adjuster that I've got in my spares, and that is also too small. So I'm going to have to order one before I can finish putting this engine back together. So I'm going to have to leave it there for now. One thing I did find when I was looking through the box of spares that came with the bike was a new needle roller bearing for the small end. It goes in here, and it does fit quite nicely. And I did read in the Haynes manual that they did change it at some point for later engines, so hopefully that is the one for the job. Anyway, thanks for subscribing. Please do so if you haven't done so, because that would be freaking sweet. And if you like the video, just press that little button by there. Oh no, that one by there. And I'll see you again soon. That hole looks to be about the same size as a metric brake union. It's also the same thread size as a metric brake union. And an M6 tap will fit inside the centre of it, which means I can tap a thread to suit the original adjuster, so that it fits the brake union.